Story 1. Grant Imahara. There was nothing wrong with him. He was a relatively healthy man with an amazing life behind him and much more ahead. He was a brilliant mind who contributed so much to the world. But a sudden aneurysm ended his life. Story 2. Most recently, Michelle Trachtenberg. She was young and talented. Rest in peace, Dawn. Story 3. I remember being about 10 when I learned that Jim Henson had died, and feeling a sadness I had never felt before. Story 4. I agree with many of the mentions here, but let me add Leonard Nimoy. Story 5. Kurt Cobain killed himself when I was in 9th grade and I was a mess. Many of my friends were too. I remember adults in my life being dismissive about reacting that way to a musician. But Nirvana, and specifically Cobain, were such a big influence on kids my age, the youngest members of Generation X and the oldest millennials. I can think of no better explanation for that nameless in-between generation than that. At a formative age, we saw Kurt Cobain in a cardigan, smoking cigarettes, standing up for his beliefs, and telling all the assholes to fuck off. Story 6. Luke Perry and Shannon Doherty were so famous in the early 1990s that it is hard to explain to anyone who was not a girl aged between 10 and 15. Story 7. Anna Nicole Smith was a shell of herself after her son died. If Danny had not died, she might still be here to raise her daughter. I still remember the Entertainment Tonight interviews in which she was completely broken, saying she had bad nightmares about her son in heaven. She needed help from those who loved her, but she mostly received attention from people who exploited her at her lowest moment. Story 8. Robin Williams made me shut down in a way that really surprised me. David Bowie broke my heart. Somehow Ozzy inspired me to live more fully. I love them all in different ways. Story 9. When Freddie Mercury died, I cried every time one of his songs came on the radio for weeks. Story 10. I guess River Phoenix is not talked about enough to be mentioned in a thread like this, but that is my answer. It makes me sad that I had to say it myself and could not just upvote it. He was a talented actor, a sweet soul, and a genuine person. My Own Private Idaho is a strange movie, but his acting in it is perhaps the most I have ever been moved by. Not to mention how many times I watched Stand By Me growing up. He would have been huge like Leonardo DiCaprio, but in a way all his own. His death was so tragic. Story 11. Philip Seymour Hoffman and Anton Yelchin were exceptionally talented actors, especially Hoffman, who likely would have given audiences decades more remarkable work. Hoffman died in his prime. Yelchin was only beginning to blossom before his death. I am a big fan of Phil Hartman and of the Canadian show Kids in the Hall. When I read that Dave Foley was cast in a new National Broadcasting Company show, I was excited. And when I learned Hartman would also be in it, I knew it would be great. I thought it would propel Foley and the rest of the cast into stardom. It gave me the feeling that I liked Foley before he was cool. Then Hartman was killed, and with his death the show died. They tried to continue without him, but he left too large a hole. I mourn Hartman and the cast, whose bright futures in television were suddenly ripped away. Story 12. Robin Williams felt like everyone's funny uncle, and it still hits years later. Story 13. Taylor Hawkins really bummed me out. Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell took a while to get over, too. Story 14. Aaliyah. When I was a young girl, I wanted to be just like her. Her death was so tragic. Story 15. Jane Goodall, the voice of conservation. Jim Henson, the voice of creativity. Robin Williams, the voice of whimsy. Basically, all my childhood heroes are dead. Story 16. Peter Steele, Ozzy, Lemmy, and Dimebag Darrell were all gut punches. Story 17. Owen Hart's death hit the hardest. I was watching the pay-per-view event and the promotional video for the match when they cut to shots of the crowd and explained what was going on. It was later announced that he had died. The tribute show the following night featured fellow wrestlers talking about what a great person he was. Story 18. Michaela Raines was the founder of Save a Fox. She was an amazing person who made fantastic Fox Rescue-related content, but some miserable people cyberbullied her to the point that she took her own life. This shocked me the most, to be honest, even more so than many prominent celebrities. Story 19. Chester Bennington. I still honestly cannot listen to Linkin Park. Story 20. Princess Diana. I wish we could see her now. She was a lovely soul who deserved so much better. I was a teenager when she married Charles. I watched from home and believed it was a dream come true. She was gone too soon. Story 21. I had three: Robin Williams, Leonard Nimoy, and Gene Wilder. There have been many times over the decades when I felt sad upon hearing of the death of a celebrity I enjoyed, but I wept for those three. Story 22. Paul Rubens. It's hard to explain, but we all watched Pee-wee's Playhouse in high school. It was the cool thing to do for a short period of time. His death felt like the death of a piece of my youth. Story 23. George Michael. There used to be a painting on the side of a house visible from the train into Sydney just before Redfern, showing him as a Christian saint with a spliff in one hand and a bottle of poppers in the other. I was working at a job that made me hate life, and seeing that every morning gave me the motivation to get through it. Story 24. Master of Ceremonies from the Beastie Boys. He seemed like a genuinely good human. Story 25. John Lennon, George Harrison, Robin Williams, Matthew Perry, and Prince. That was so shocking to me. Story 26. Robin Williams. For him, it was always seeing the deep sadness behind his eyes masked by a smile, and creating joy and happiness for others. Any death by suicide is heartbreaking. I have experienced rock bottom and the pain that often leads people to take their own lives, and it is devastating when I hear another person has been lost. Those feelings and thoughts I would not wish on anyone. To know firsthand that they can torture you for years and decades makes it hard not to deeply feel for them. Story 27. I did not know his music that well, but I cried when David Bowie died. Loving heroes that much was enough to make me sad. Story 28. Charles M. Schulz. Peanuts was the first comic strip I liked as a little kid, and I used to trace Snoopy because I couldn't draw him well enough. My older brother had a bunch of the books, too. His death hit me deeply. Story 29. Michelle Trachtenberg and I were the same age, and I grew up watching her movies, starting with Harriet the Spy. Story 30. John Lennon. I was 14, and to this day part of my heart hasn't healed. Story 31. For Whom the Bell Tolls and others, including Davy Jones, Adam Yauch, Peter Tork, George Harrison, Warren Zevon, Thurman Munson, Payne Stewart, and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Story 32. Anthony Bourdain. I was surprised at how his death distressed me and how it still hurts. I am not sure why. Story 33. Anthony Bourdain brought you into his world, where you almost felt like you knew him. He had charm, charisma, and playfulness, and a genuine passion for understanding different cultures and people. His writing was next level. He painted the picture so you felt like you were there. I still remember his visits to different countries vividly, and the two Ask Me Anything sessions he did on Reddit showed that there was nothing he would not talk about. Story 34. Kurt Cobain died on my birthday. I think about it often. It's kind of strange. Story 35. Jim Croce. Much too early. Also Harry Chapin and Gord Downie. Story 36. Quite a few on this list were a shock to the world when we lost them. I have to give a nod to the brilliant Dame Maggie Smith and Betty White, the delightfully sassy, hysterical grandmothers you always wanted. Story 37. Definitely Steve Irwin. He was like a father to the children who dreamed of things bigger than themselves. Even as a kid, I realized how important environmentalism and conservation were. Steve made me fall in love with the outdoors, and seeing someone so passionate about wildlife made me feel that I too could make a difference. He was my role model, and his passing left a pit in my heart. Now, as an adult with more life experience, I still appreciate what a wonderful man, father, husband, and human being he was. The world lost a true gem that day. Story 38. Joan Rivers was accused of having plastic surgery. She could not breathe or speak and underwent corrective surgery, but she died unexpectedly. Story 39. Gord Downie was the poetic soul of the tragically hip Canadian legends. His solo work was weird and wonderful too. They were a huge part of my teenage and early adult years. I cannot believe it has been 10 years since I last saw the hip. I did not make it to the final tour, but I watched the last concert 9 years ago on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I have been shocked or saddened by the passing of many celebrities, but Gord was the only one for whom I shed tears. Story 40. Michael Clark Duncan. Way too soon. He was funny and could make me cry. Such range. Story 41. On Sunday, August 10th, 1969, I was delivering the morning paper on my bicycle when I realized the woman on the front page was Sharon Tate and that she had been horribly murdered the night before. I had a Playboy magazine hidden under my mattress in which she appeared. I have never felt the same about celebrities. Story 42. I know she had some issues, but Lisa Left Eye Lopez was definitely my favorite of the trio. I love Tyan, Lisa, and Chili. Lisa was working on turning her life around. Story 43. Daniel Naroditsky, the chess streamer, was a small-time celebrity. I was extremely sad watching his content every day. Chester Bennington's death was also very difficult for me. Story 44. Mac Miller. Bourdain. A Scottish DJ called Jackmaster. Most recently, in the last few days, Monty from the Stone Roses. Story 45. John Lennon. George Carlin. Tim Russert. Tom Lehrer. Robin Williams. Betty White. Story 46. I was obsessed with Tony Bourdain's shows and, funnily enough, never read his books. His perspective, narration, and delivery were so poignant and insightful. I think of him more as a travel philosopher than a chef. He understood the importance of travel and how it creates empathy and understanding. Every time I travel abroad, I hear his voiceover in my head, narrating the experiences, mingling with the locals, and learning as much as possible about their culture. I wept during the documentary Roadrunner. I had to watch it twice to relive his greatness and to feel his isolation and sadness. Story 47. Liam Payne. A big crack in the mirror of my childhood. Story 48. Robin Williams is the one celebrity whose passing genuinely affected me. I am a fan of many public figures, and it is always disappointing to hear that someone has died, but usually their passing does not change my life. I do not know them personally, so my deepest sadness is reserved for friends, family, and people in my community. When Robin Williams died, I felt real, personal sadness. I am not sure why his death affected me so much, but it did. He brought a positive, uplifting presence to the world, and when he was gone it felt as if everyone lost a little. His impact reached people he never met, and that is what made his loss different. Story 49. I think of Anthony Bourdain sometimes. He seemed so down to earth and he really loved what he did. You could say the same about many people who have died by suicide. Story 50. Leslie Jordan always made me laugh, especially with his posts during the pandemic. What are you all doing, screwing? Story 51. Cameron Boyce, Steve Irwin, Robin Williams, Matthew Perry, Charlie, Chadwick Boseman, Jimmy Buffett, Liam Payne, and Toby Keith. These names bring back so many childhood memories, especially Cameron Boyce. Story 52. Robin Williams affected me deeply, but the person who really got to me was Twitch. With Robin Williams, I could understand more after learning he had Lewy body dementia. Twitch's death seems so sad and senseless, especially because he was so young and so talented. It still devastates me every time I think about it. Story 53. Most of the people listed did, but I still cannot watch a River Phoenix movie to this day. I'm a member of Generation X, and he was the first shocking death of my generation that hit me hard. Story 54. Ozzy. I think he had a rough decade leading up to it, and he looked so happy during the final show in his hometown team stadium with all the musicians who came to play for him. It really saddened me to hear he was gone not long after that. Story 55. Bowie and Alan Rickman within weeks of each other. Shook. Story 56. Anthony Bourdain was very talented. I loved watching his shows. He was an inspiration to chefs around the world. His books are excellent, and he was a fascinating person. It is very sad that he died by suicide. Story 57. I always thought Carrie Fisher would live forever, having survived Hollywood for so long. Story 58. Grant Imahara was the one who really hit hard for me. It was a stark reminder that it will come for you one day, often without any warning. Story 59. Trevor Moore from The Whitest Kids You Know. I am still sad about it to this day. Story 60. Jim Henson died the same day as Sammy Davis Jr. Also Sherry Lewis, because I did not know how to tell my daughter about it. She did not take the ending of Charlotte's Web well before that. Story 61. Robin Williams was the first celebrity whose death affected me. I think part of why it hit me so hard was the mask of comedy he wore, and I understand why he did it. Story 62. Sean Locke takes the top spot for me. I think Andre Braugher is number 2. Story 63. Anthony Bourdain, Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, and Brent Hines. Story 64. I feel lucky I saw Chi-Chi DeVane perform live before she became ill. Story 65. Joey Jordison from Slipknot and Ozzy Osbourne. Darkman X Earl Simmons made me really upset too. Oderus Urungus, Dave Brockie from Gwar, devastated me. Story 66. Sherry Lewis. I was 9 when she died, and I remember being very upset about it. I think that was when I really understood the permanence of death. Also Dolores O'Riordan and Leonard Cohen. Story 67. Chris Cornell really bummed me out. When I was going through a difficult time, his music was always there to pull me through. Story 68. I don't know if he counts as a celebrity, but Technoblade's death hit me hard. I almost cried when I saw Skeppy's response to it. Story 69. Many of the above made me sad, but I remember being absolutely shocked by Stephen Twitch Boss's suicide. He always looked so happy and appeared to be having the best time on his television shows. It goes to show you never know what is going on for someone. Always be kind. Story 70. John Candy. I was a huge fan. Unfortunately, I had a paper route for the Flint Journal and had to deliver the headline announcing his death 75 times. He was just the first. Story 71. John Candy. I always cry at the end of Uncle Buck and have a complete sobbing fit during planes, trains, and automobiles. I don't know why I connected to him so deeply. Even decades after his death, I tear up when I see him smile at the end of those films, and the train station scene still leaves me a wreck. Story 72. It rained in Minneapolis for 3 days after Prince died. Story 73. Paul Rubens, also known as Pee Wee Herman. Now I'll never be able to talk with him about our mothers, who were great friends at the university in Boston in the late 1940s. Story 74. Robin Williams, Whitney Houston, Matthew Perry, Luke Perry, Shannon Doherty. Story 75. Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, Matthew Perry, and Robert Redford. Robert Redford was one of my favorites. Yes, I'm old. I watched 3 days of The Condor tonight. Story 76. Steven Hillenburg created my childhood. Story 77. Brittany Murphy was such a great talent, and we would never see how far she could go. Freddie Mercury was the first big one for me, followed just 3 years later by Kurt Cobain. Story 78. There have been a few. David Bowie, Alan Rickman, Robin Williams, but the one that hit me hardest was Ozzy Osbourne. It took me a while to get into Black Sabbath, and I haven't been able to watch any videos with my family or any documentaries because it makes me too sad. Story 79. Kobe. A week after his death, I realized he had been a massive part of my childhood and represented a special part of the bond my brothers, my father, and I shared while I lived at home. Completely broke me. Story 80. Posting this before someone says they could never be sad about a celebrity's death. Story 81. Neil Peart was one of the greatest drummers of all time and the lyricist for Rush. They are on a new tour now, and there is a hole there even with a new drummer. I am glad I got to see them in 2012 for Clockwork Angels. Story 82. Philip Hughes and Ben Hollyoak, cricketers of enormous potential who died before they could fully realize it. The Vivian, so talented at so many things and gone way too soon. And Anthony Bourdain too. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.